Ghost of Tsushima was certainly one of my most anticipated games to play during 2020. With me avoiding the Final Fantasy VII Remake and me being uninterested in playing Naughty Dog's latest game, I really needed a game to conclude the long lineup of great PlayStation 4 exclusives that has come out this generation. Well, I'm happy to say that Sucker Punch has certainly lived up to its reputation and delivered a truly spectacular title with Ghost of Tsushima. And what I find even more fitting is that it was Sucker Punch themselves that delivered the first truly great must-play exclusive title in the form of infamous Second Son back in 2014, so who better to give us the final must-play exclusive? Now, me being a big fan of Japanese culture, the story focus in Ghost of Tsushima already had me hooked from the moment I first saw exactly what this game was going to be about. The story takes place in the 13th century when the Mongolian invasion has begun their attack on the Japanese island of Tsushima. You will take control of the samurai warrior Jin, who is one of the 80 samurai warriors who engaged the massive Mongolian forces during the beginning of their invasion. Unfortunately, the samurai force would be decimated and Jin would be left for dead, and his uncle Lord Shumura would be captured by the leader of the Mongolian forces, Khotan Khan. After being rescued and nursed back to health by a thief named Yuna, Jin and Yuna travel across the island of Tsushima to gather allies and inspire the people to rise up and fight against the Mongolian invaders. Now, the real heart that drives the majority of the key moments that play throughout the main plot is a simple moral question that is to be asked, and that is, what is the best method to use when dealing with the Mongolians? Raised to be a samurai, Jin was taught to fight with honor and to follow strict rules when it comes to how one should act when facing the enemy in battle. But if there's any one lesson that he takes away from his first encounter with the Mongolians, it is that this is an enemy that knows the samurai way and is fully prepared to use their strict code of honor against them. This is when Jin takes on the persona known as the Ghost, and now using indirect and unconventional tactics becomes the kind of threat that the enemy has trouble adapting to. And while his actions bring hope to the people and instill fear amongst his enemies, the internal struggle of how Jin deals with these difficult decisions that he has to make are really some of Ghost of Tsushima's best moments, and this internal struggle is not limited to Jin only, as a number of your allies that you will come across throughout the game will have their own internal battles to fight that make them question themselves and just how far they're willing to go to settle a personal score of their own. Now, if the story of Ghost of Tsushima had any one weak link, it would have to be that this game sadly suffers from having a rather weak and one-note antagonist in the form of Khotan Khan. Now, he certainly looks intimidating and does enough throughout the game that really makes you want to cut this man's head off, but just in about every single scene that he is shown, he is too much of a diplomat or a negotiator. Regardless of who he is talking to, all he says are things like, "Join me," or "Convince the people to do as I say and they will have peace," etc., etc. And he is like this throughout the entire game, even up to the very end when you have made it very clear that you do not want to negotiate, and he is still trying. And it got to the point where I just want to kill this guy, not because I want revenge, but because I just want to shut him up. But despite suffering from having a weak antagonist, there is still so much of the storyline to explore to make Ghost of Tsushima one of the most fascinating stories that I've explored amongst the great lineup of PlayStation exclusive titles that has come out this generation. Now, Ghost of Tsushima can be classified as an open-world action-adventure title with a number of RPG elements added into it. The primary gameplay is divided between exploration and combat. When it comes to exploration, once you have passed the first hour, you really are free to explore just about anywhere you want within the first section of the island. The island of Tsushima is separated into three main areas divided by the three primary acts you have to play through, and the farther into each act that you get, the more of the island you'll be able to explore. There are numerous and various different interest posts spread throughout the island that will keep you busy for many hours. You can choose to climb up a mountain point and visit some shrines that will grant you some perks. You might stumble across a fox's den that will ask you to follow a fox to a certain location, and once reached to that location will grant you some helpful aid. You can even choose to take a break and locate some hot springs so Jin can take a bath, in which in turn it will increase his health. And there are many other activities that you can do away from combat that will really pay off if you go out of your way to complete these activities. Speaking of combat, this is where the real action happens. For starters, this is not your typical hack and slash title, and in combat it is very important to block, parry, and dodge opponent attacks should you choose to face them in a head-to-head engagement. Over the course of the game, you will gain access to 4 different fighting stances. Each stance is designed to work best against a specific type of enemy that you will encounter throughout the game. Being able to switch between these stances is important should you find yourself fight multiple different enemies at once. You will also gain access to a number of throwing weapons that can aid you in combat. You will also be granted access to the use of a bow that can take out enemies at a distance and can even be used to go hunting. Now, before most encounters, you will have the choice to take part in what is called a standoff, which gives you the opportunity to cut down your opponents with a single strike by timing your strikes properly. There are also a number of one-on-one duels which act as boss fights with a multitude of different opponents that all require different approaches in order to win, and really provide some of the more challenging fights throughout the entire game. Now, if you choose to face your opponents in a non-direct approach and rely on using stealth, you will have access to a number of unique tools and abilities to take care of your enemies quick and quietly as possible without attracting too much attention. The RPG element comes into play as you level up your character and collect what are called technique points, which can then be used to help learn new abilities in combat or enhance the effectiveness of your combative tools. As you gather resources, you can also enhance the strength and effectiveness of your blades and bow, and gradually improve the quality of your armor that you will collect throughout the game. You can even change the overall color and look of your armor and weapons. When it comes to combat, the only real issue that I encountered is because this game doesn't really seem to have a dedicated lock-on function, the positioning of your camera can make it very difficult to keep track of what enemies are surrounding you, along with when incoming attacks are coming. Now, because you may end up fighting and having to switch between your 4 different fighting stances in one battle, this can get rather frustrating at first. And while you certainly can adapt to this issue over time, and with some improvements you can actually use your technique approach to overcome this issue, it is something that never really seems to go away, and is something that you will always have to be mindful of. When it comes to the game's visuals, in my opinion, you really have to divide it into 2 categories. While the character models are very well detailed, so much so that you can literally see the sweat dripping down their faces, these are not the best models that I myself have seen come out during this generation of console gaming, even while playing on my PlayStation 4 Pro with a 4K television. However, when it comes to the visuals on the environments, that is really where this game becomes simply beautiful just to look at. Now, I've always wanted to visit Japan, and behind visiting the United Kingdom, Japan is my second favorite foreign country that I want to visit. And playing through this game, and just seeing how beautiful certain areas of Tsushima are during the middle of a Mongolian invasion, make me want to visit Japan even more now. The amount of detail that has gone into these locations, like the forests and meadows of beautiful flowers, and even the towns, is amongst the best that I've ever seen in any game. And I would even go so far as to say that Ghost of Tsushima has the most majestic depiction of Japan I've ever seen, giving me the closest feeling that I could ever have to knowing what it may have been in the 13th century of Japan. It's also really cool that at the beginning of the game you have the option to play this game in what is called Kurosama mode, which pretty much turns everything black and white and makes the game look like those old school traditional samurai films, creating its own unique experience away from the traditional style of visuals that you would expect. Now, when all said and done, I absolutely loved Ghost of Tsushima. This is without question the best new game that I've played this year. I don't really count Persona 5 Royal as a new game since it's just an updated version of an older game, but this is absolutely a great game to close out the PlayStation 4 lineup of exclusive games. Now, one issue that I didn't mention earlier on in this video that I would like just to touch on a little bit now that I've heard no one talk about is the fact that because this game came from Sucker Punch and they're best known from their infamous games, I'm surprised that with the direction or kind of conflict that this story has in terms of Jin needing to decide whether he needs to be a samurai or needs to fight more as the ghost, I'm surprised that they didn't add the element of choice in terms of choosing which path you want it to go. Now, there are a couple of gameplay moments where you can kind of choose that, but it doesn't really affect the story. I think if had there been like a meter element that allows you to kind of choose whether you want to fight or as a samurai or as a ghost, and that your decisions actually choose the path and direction that the story goes, I think that would have added a much higher level of replayability. Because the way the story is structured, it is so much on a linear path that by the time you get to the end, it even has the balls to try to have multiple different endings. But one of the endings doesn't make sense because there's nothing that Jin has done through this entire path, this linear path that he has gone, that would even hint that he would even do this secondary choice. So the fact that they didn't have that option, I thought was slightly disappointing. I think if it had that option, then this is a game I absolutely would have wanted to play twice, because then I would have wanted to choose to play as a ghost first and then play as a samurai and see the difference in the story. But the fact that this game doesn't do that, I think just kind of makes this more of a one-play game. Now don't get me wrong, I'm going to be playing this for several more days until I get the Platinum Trophy and do everything this game has to offer. But once I've done that, I don't really see a reason to come back to this. And I do, however, believe that there is potential for this to become a franchise and for there to be a follow-up on the PlayStation 5. But if I had to give Ghost of Tsushima a rating, I'm going to have to give it an 8.5. Still a great game. Absolutely contender for Game of the Year. Not sure if it will win, but I do think that that's where I personally stand with this. I know a lot of people are going to absolutely fall in love with this game. I love this game. However, there are just a couple little flaws that hold it back. So those are my thoughts on Ghost of Tsushima. If you've played this game also, I would love to hear your thoughts, or heck, if you think you could have improved it or think something could have been added, let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and press the subscribe button to see more content like this. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.